Welcome to AquariumRadio.com. AquariumRadio.com.
Aloha everyone and welcome to Aquarium Radio at aquariumradio.com. And I am your host Janet Lesson with my co-host Dr. Sasha Lesson. And today is an episode of We the Anunnaki, and the title of today's show is Anunnaki Imprints. Dr. Lesson.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to bring to you today a slideshow.
Actually, this is an auditory presentation. Could you go back? Let's start over again.
No.
I don't want to start here.
Let's go here. Go ahead.
Today, we'd like to just discuss 4 slices of Anunnaki history. And the slices are called the gold slice, the slave slice, the civilization slice, and the nuking slice. For the gold slice, we're going to talk about the Anunnaki, who are people like us from the planet Nibiru who came to Earth for gold. And this is 450,000 years ago. That's slice 1, gold. Then we'll talk about slice 2, which is slaves. The Anunnaki adapted their genome to Earth to make us slaves about 300,000 years ago. That's our second slice. The third slice, civilization. After the deluge, the Anunnaki gave us kings, cities, commerce, and war. And then the last slice that we'll deal with in this program is the nuking. The Anunnaki nuked Sinai and Canaan, and they radiated Iraq. Let's look at each one of those. And this is all sort of a summary of the books that Janet Lesson and I wrote, Anunnaki Gods No More, Legacy of the Gods, and Anunnaki False Gods. These are 4 slices. And we got our inspiration from Zecharia Sitchin. Sitchin read clay tablets and cylinder seals that the Anunnaki dictated and the Sumerians inscribed about events from 5,000 years on.
Next. So giant Homo sapiens from Nibiru came to Earth for gold, and they added Erectus genes to their genome, and they made the slaves, which are us, human beings. They tried to drown us in Noah's flood. Post-flood, they reclaimed the earth and ruled via Noah's sons, and gave us civilization and made us fight each other. They nuked and radiated their Middle Eastern space facilities, and most left Earth to their exiled Prince Marduk.
So, let's look at this first slice about these people. 450,000 years ago, the Anunnaki from Nibiru came from gold, and their planet, Nibiru, crosses into our inner solar system between Jupiter and Mars. And here's how it came about. Nibiru's atmosphere was degrading. 600,000 years ago, volcanoes quit spewing on the ash on Nibiru, and they left a big hole in the ozone. So Nibiru was chilled in space and heated when it got close to Nemesis and close to Solaris, but in between, it was having a hard time, and it wasn't insulated anymore. Ignoring his Go ahead. Ignoring his scientists, Nibiru's king Lama did not nuke the volcanoes to spew the ash as he'd been advised, and he didn't get and spread the monoatomic gold over Nibiru's ozone hole either.
So Prince Alalu slew King Lama for failing to address the atmospheric loss, and he threw Lama from the tower and yelled, "Now I'm king." Prince Alalu, like I said before, slew Lama, but to beget a successor, Alalu gave his daughter Damkina to pretender Anu's son Enki. So Enki is the son of Anu. To avert civil war with the pretender Anu, Alalu gave his daughter to Enki, Anu's son, to wed. And that created an alliance. And Enki's other names are Ea, Ptah, Poseidon, and Adonai. He is a god. And Damkina wed Enki, and she bore Marduk, who is the legal successor to Nibiru's upstart king Alalu.
Anu took the number 2 post, as Alalu's cupbearer. He's serving the king. And Alalu's volcano nuking he did nuke the volcanoes, but it didn't give enough ash to shield the ionosphere of the planet. He also sent a rocket for Earth's gold, but the craft hit an asteroid and everybody got killed.
And Anu eventually wrestled and deposed Alalu. And when they engaged in hand-to-hand combat, and in those days they wrestled naked, and they challenged them and they grappled with each other in the public square. And let the winner be king, Anu said. That's how they settled disputes. And Anu won, and he ruled Nibiru. Alalu, meanwhile, fled to Earth in the nuke-armed rocket. There was a rocket ship that was armed with nuclear warheads. And he landed on the marsh near Basara on the Persian Gulf.
Okay. So Alalu's there in the Persian Gulf, and he messages Anu back on Nibiru. On Earth, I have gold to save Nibiru, or missiles to blast it, unless you return Nibiru's throne to me. Well, the Nibiruan military council sent Enki. After all, he was Anu's son-in-law and he was Anu's son and Alalu's son-in-law. So the Nibiruan council sent Enki and 50 guys, piloted by Alalu's kinsman Anzu, to the Persian Gulf to see if they could mollify the old man. And he was the one that could mediate between them because he related to both. Well,
Enki and his pilot Abgal stole Alalu's nuclear missiles, which Alalu had taken from Nibiru, and they went to an African cave and they hid them. And only Enki and Abgal knew where these were hidden. And eventually, Pilot Abgal, who helped Enki hide Alalu's nukes, will eventually betray Enki, but that'll come later. That'll come into play later.
So Anu sent the rockets to get lots of gold from Earth and take the gold to the moon and Mars and other places, and he was going to make a whole transshipment settlement to Nibiru. He's organizing all this from Nibiru. And volunteers from Nibiru worked the South African gold mines. They were underground for years and years and years in the underground mining complexes. And then
the Anunnaki commander Enlil, also known as Yahweh, raped Sud, who was the chief medical officer, Nimma's number 2. She was the second after Nimma in the medical officer field. And Nimma and the council exiled Enlil to Africa. That was normally they would kill people who raped, but they just exiled them, right? Anyway.
No, I don't think that's right.
Okay,
they would. The Anunnaki had no qualms about killing regular people, but they would not kill people in their own family. They just exiled them. And that's going to be very, very important because later on you'll see Marduk is saying he's only getting his brother exiled and not killing him, even though he got killed in the act.
Right. So Abgal told Enlil, here's where Enki hid the nukes that were from Alalu and the codes to arm them. And with them, you can reclaim rule. So even though he was shamed and exiled, he was given a way back. So Enlil kept this knowledge of the nukes cave a secret. And Enlil resumed rule, and he came home, and he married Sud, and he named her Ninlil. Sud said, okay, I'll marry him.
And so he didn't have to tell anybody that Abigail had told him where the nukes were. He got to keep that secret for another day.
Later time.
Okay, let's look at slice 2 now. Slice 2 is about slaves. That's us. The Anunnaki adapted their genome to Earth to make us slaves. Enki, Nimma, and Ningishita studied Erectus, that's Bigfoot, and our compassionate, telepathic, intelligent, fire-using African hominoid ancestor, Homo erectus. Enki got the miners to mutiny as an excuse to adapt the Nibiruan genome with Erectus genes and to create us workers. And he was the one that instigated a slowdown. And he got the miners to threaten Enlil.
So in 3000 BCE, in clay and copper vessels, Ningishita planted an Erectus Nibiruan zygote in Nimba, who, by cesarean, bore a black-haired, dark red-skinned boy, Adamu. And Adamu had a foreskin, which Nibiruans lacked. So Nimba actually figured out this is what you needed to do in order to create a species that was viable, that could speak and take orders. And his name was Adamu. In 3000 BCE, Nimba bore Adamu. And the first hybrid Anunnaki erectus female, Damkina. Damkina was, of course, you remember, Enki's wife through a political marriage. Damkina volunteered, as all volunteers, to bear the child, and she delivered a blonde-haired, white-skinned, she was a sandy-haired girl with blue eyes, and her name was Tiamat. And Tiamat has MDMA from both Nimma and Damkina. You want to do this one?
Go ahead.
Okay, Ningishita found the XX and XY genes that led Adamu and Tiamat, that let Adamu and Tiamat be able to breed. So he's the one. This is the very famous fall from grace. The Adam and Eve were able to reproduce.
Right. So this beautiful child is named Tiamat, and she's the first self-aware ancestress. One of the things that we know is it was a few thousand years between the time that Adamu was developed and Tiamat was developed. So she was already intrinsically superior just because of her genetics. And Enlil said, "Hey, bring these up so I can take a look at them." And Enki had a garden right next to Enlil's, and he took Adamu and Tiamat to his place in Basra in Iraq. And there they got to visit their kids every day, even though as the children got a little bit older, around teenagers, Enlil would come over and give them orders and boss them around. But anyway, she was pregnant, and pretty soon Enlil noticed that. And so Enlil comes over one day, and Tiamat has assembled on a table the geometrics of how to make pyramids and tetrahedrons and all kinds of things. And she says, "Oh, hi, look, Uncle Enlil, look what I've got here." And she starts talking about, and I made this on the table, and I made these clothes, and she just starts chatting. And Enlil sees she's pregnant and hears that she's just every bit as intelligent as a Nibiruan child, and he freaks out and says, bind Enki up. And that's what, and they put an electrical grid around him, but the council said, "Oh, that's nonsense. He didn't do anything that bad. Let him go."
So Enlil sent Tiamat and Adam to Zimbabwe, and he's told them, "Go breed." 300,000 years ago to 200,000 BCE, Adamu's descendants dug gold in South Africa.
So this is the next.
This is the next segment. And then the gold was boated to Iraq, and Anunnaki in Iraq refined the gold, and the Gigi astronauts rocketed to Mars and transshipped it to Nibiru. So they had a system of taking the gold from the mines and refining it, taking it to Mars, and from there they shipped it to Nibiru. And on Nibiru, the gold dust lessened Nibiru's ozone hole. They had a huge hole in their ozone layer, And the hybrids dug South Africa's gold and smelted it in Sumer and rocketed it to the Mars base, then to Nibiru. So the slaves dug African gold and Anunnaki boated it and smelted it in Iraq, then rocketed it to Mars base and Nibiru. We have illustrations of this, so we're just repeating it. And they said, we Anunnaki give you food and housings, and you Earthlings mine the gold. And by the way, keep making those babies. That's where we get the story of be fruitful and multiply. But enough already. We got 7.5 billion of us. Enough.
So, around 200,000 BCE, Nibiru came close again, and this time it just rained rocks on Mars base, ruined it, ruined Earth crops. And so Enlil started clamoring for better slaves. The slaves that they had from Adam and Tiamat had gone off in the bush and stopped working for the Anunnaki, and they were saving themselves and developing tribal customs and stuff. And so Enki had just a way to make superior slaves. He found 2 really pretty Adamite girls, and Janet will tell you the story.
So Damkina and Enki raised their children Adapa and Titi, and Enki begat Adapa and Titi with 2 different mothers. The girls descended from Adamu and Tiamat.
Right.
And so Damkina loved Titi and taught Titi, took her to be her special project. And Enki loved Adapa, so he tutored Adapa, and he taught Adapa to run farms and herds and estates. And Adapa's own descendants were called Adapites, and the less enhanced hybrids were the Adamites.
So Adapa was running both the super slaves, the Adapites, and the field slaves and the mine slaves, the Adamites. Enki taught Adapa how to keep records, how to run farms, how to manage herds, how to manage large estates. And he really taught him how to run people. Well, Anu heard all about Adapa, and he sent Adapa with his sons that he had with. So Adapa is Enki's son, but with a slave girl. Okay, and he sends him with his real son Dumuzi. What I mean, real son is that the son that he had with Damkina, and his other son, Dumuzi's half brother, Ningishita, whom Enki had with Erishkigal, and he sends them all to Nibiru. So these 2 pure Anunnaki, Dumuzi and Ningishita, are accompanying Adapa, who's scared out of his mind going in this rocket ship. Go.
Ningishita gave a tablet from Enki to Anu, and it said, "Deny Adapa immortality." So they're up there on Nibiru. Now, Slice 3 is about civilizations. After the deluge, the Anunnaki gave us kings, cities, commerce, and war. This is 11,000 BCE.
Yeah, so this is slices. We're skipping where Enlil says, "I'll let them all drown," and Enki saves us, and so forth. And they decide they're going to rebuild afterwards, and so they give us civilization. Enki agreed that Enlil said, "Okay, all right, we will let these Earthlings survive. We'll repopulate the Earth, but we'll rule as gods, and we'll rule through Noah's sons, Shem, Japheth, and Ham."
In 11,000 BCE, after Noah's flood, the Anunnaki lineages cooperated for 1,000 years, and they reclaimed Iraq from mud, and they dug riverbeds and canals. And after Noah's flood, once again, the Anunnaki lineages cooperated 1,000 years. Here we go. They built cities of 20,000 hybrids under their chosen kings. Sorry about that. And the Nerta built dams, dug tunnels, drained floodwaters into rivers. And the Anunnaki revised Sumer from 11,000 to 10,500 BCE. They gave Sumer crops, beasts, plows, wheels, carts, chariots, bronze, bricks, big buildings, canals, dams, and taxes. They ruled slaves through Ziasudra's sons, Ham, Japhet and Shem, or Ham. And
They had step temples. They taught us brick making. They gave us animals and wheels. They gave us the plow. First they had people pulling it, and then animals. They gave us writing. They gave us math. They gave us schools. Trade just grew and grew. The cities grew from 10,000 to as many as 50,000 hybrids.
And slice 4, we're talking about the nuking. Anunnaki nuked Sinai and Canaan and radiated Iraq. Marduk and Nabu closed in on the Sinai space facilities in 2040 BCE. And Emil spy Abraham. Sodom's in Marduk and Nabu's camp, he relayed that they had sinned because they went over to the other side. And Enki thought that the nukes were hidden, but remember earlier, Enlil knew where the nukes were. Go ahead.
Okay, so Enlil calms Dad, Anu, back on Nibiru. Dad, please, give your okay for Ninurta and Nergal to nuke Marduk's forces, or he's going to take Earth. You know, he may even take your place at Nibiru too. You got to say okay, Dad. Well, Anu said, okay, nuke.
And the Anunnaki in 2025 BC nuked the Sinai and south bank of the Salt Sea, flooding Sodom and Gomorrah to stop Marduk and his forces. And they nuked the south shore of the Salt Sea, creating the dead radioactive sea, the Dead Sea. The Salt Sea is the Dead Sea. That's why that's that way. The Salt Sea flooded the rebel cities. And Sodom was pretty desecrated after the nukes, nothing left. And Ninurta obliterated the Sinai spaceport. And the radiation killed most of Sumer, and the clouds swept over. The Anunnaki had forgotten what it was like when you radiated something, you nuked it, and they forgot about the cloud. And it killed all of Sumer except Marduk's Babylon. Many of the Anunnaki had to run for the hills. And Ninurta's wife, Bau, she died while doctoring Lagash's earthlings. Okay.
So the next presentation, you're going to find out what happened when Marduk takes charge of the earth.
Okay. One moment here. And that has been another episode of We the Anunnaki, a part of AquarianRadio.com, and we thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for joining us today on Aquarian Radio. We broadcast daily and are scheduled on AquarianRadio.com. Listen live by calling 646-649-0893, or you can listen live by calling 646-649-0893, or listen to our archive on AquarianRadio.com. Join us again soon, and do tell your friends. The age of Aquarius and the Anunnaki.